Before candles glow and tables are set, imagine yourself standing quietly in medieval England on a cold December evening. Snow presses softly against thatched roofs, bells echo faintly in the distance, and behind different doors, some wide and stone-built, others low and smoky, Christmas is being prepared in very different ways. What the rich and the poor shared, what they never could, and how these quiet, uneven traditions shape the holiday you know today is a slower, subtler story than you might expect. And it unfolds best if you stay with it until the very end. In medieval England, Christmas arrived not as a single day of excitement, but as a slow seasonal turning point that settled differently on the lives of the poor and the rich. As the days shortened and the cold pressed itself into stone walls and timber beams, people across the social spectrum became aware of Christmas long before it arrived. You can imagine the approach of winter as something physical, felt in the stiffness of fingers, the careful rationing of food, and the quiet calculations about how long stored supplies might last. Christmas sat within this reality, shaped not by fantasy, but by survival, hierarchy, and routine. For the poor, Christmas was less a feast and more a pause. Most peasants lived close to subsistence, working land that belonged to someone else and owing labor or rent for the right to survive upon it. By December, fields lay fallow and agricultural labor slowed, though it never truly stopped. Animals still needed care, tools required maintenance, and fuel had to be gathered. Christmas did not erase these needs. Instead, it offered a brief easing of obligations. Lords often relaxed labor requirements for a few days, and courts paused their business. For a peasant family, this temporary quiet mattered more than abundance. Food was central to Christmas for everyone, but what appeared on the table depended entirely on status. Poor households rarely experienced a dramatic change in diet. Bread made from rye or barley remained the staple. Pottage, a thick stew of grains, vegetables, and whatever scraps could be spared, continued to simmer over the hearth. If a family was fortunate, Christmas might mean the addition of a small piece of salted meat or fish saved carefully for the occasion. In some regions, communal customs allowed tenants access to a shared animal slaughtered for winter. But portions were modest and strictly controlled. The rich, by contrast, experienced Christmas as a display of abundance. In castles and manor houses, preparations began weeks in advance. Livestock were selected for slaughter, ale was brewed in larger quantities, and spices, expensive imports, were brought out from locked chests. For nobles, Christmas feasting was not merely indulgence. It was performance. Hosting a generous table demonstrated wealth, authority, and divine favor. A lord who fed many mouths reinforced his position in the social order. Yet even here, Christmas followed established rules. The medieval calendar treated Christmas as the beginning of a season, not a single event. The 12 days of Christmas structured noble households, with feasts repeated and guests arriving and departing according to custom. For servants and retainers, this period meant long hours of work. Kitchens remained busy, fires burned constantly, and cleaning never stopped. The abundance enjoyed by the elite relied heavily on the labor of others. Religion shaped Christmas equally for rich and poor, though the experience varied. The Church defined Christmas as a solemn celebration of Christ's birth, preceded by Advent, a period of preparation and restraint. For the poor, Advent restrictions often made little practical difference. Their daily diet was already limited, and fasting rules aligned closely with necessity. For the rich, however, Advent required intentional moderation, heightening the contrast when Christmas finally arrived. Church attendance marked the season across classes. Even the poorest villagers were expected to attend Mass on Christmas Day, if weather and health allowed. Churches were cold, stone buildings, minimally heated, and services were conducted in Latin, a language few understood. Yet familiarity filled the gaps. The rhythms of prayer, the sound of chant, and the glow of candles created a shared experience. for a peasant standing in worn shoes beside neighbors. Christmas Mass was one of the few moments when rich and poor occupied the same space, even if separated by seating and status. After Mass, the paths of rich and poor diverged again. Noble households returned to halls hung with greenery. Evergreen branches, holly, ivy, and sometimes bay were brought indoors as symbols of continuity and life. These decorations were not festive in the modern sense, but symbolic, connecting households to older traditions that predated Christianity. Poor families sometimes hung a simple sprig over the door, gathered from nearby woods, not as decoration but as a quiet gesture of participation in the season. Gift-giving existed, but it bore little resemblance to modern expectations. Among the poor, gifts were rare and practical. A piece of clothing repaired or replaced, a small tool, or extra food might change hands quietly within a family. Children did not expect toys. Survival shaped expectations early. Among the wealthy, gifts reinforced hierarchy. Lords distributed clothing, coins, or food to servants and dependents, reinforcing loyalty and obligation. Gifts moved downward through society far more often than upward. Entertainment during Christmas also reflected class divisions. For peasants, evenings might include simple storytelling, shared songs, or games requiring no equipment. These activities took place in dimly lit cottages, crowded and smoky, with little privacy. Christmas did not bring performers to villages. It simply allowed people time to sit together. Laughter, when it came, was subdued, shaped by fatigue and cold. In noble households, entertainment became more elaborate. Minstrels, musicians, and sometimes actors were invited to perform. Games of chants, riddles, and mock ceremonies filled the long evenings. The Lord of Misrule, a figure appointed to oversee festive disorder, appeared primarily in wealthy households, where controlled chaos served as a reminder that order would soon return. Even this reversal of roles remained carefully contained within accepted boundaries. Clothing provided another visible contrast. For the poor, Christmas clothes were the same garments worn throughout winter, perhaps freshly washed or patched. Wool tunics and cloaks were valued possessions, repaired repeatedly over years. For the rich, Christmas offered an opportunity to display new fabrics. Bright dyes, furs, and layered garments appeared at feasts and church services. Clothing communicated wealth as clearly as food, despite these differences. Christmas carried meaning for both groups, rooted in continuity rather than change. The poor did not expect transformation. Christmas was a reassurance that the cycle of seasons continued, that winter had structure, and that survival through it was possible. The rich, meanwhile, used Christmas to reinforce stability. By performing generosity and order, they signaled that the social hierarchy remained intact, sanctioned by both tradition and faith. Winter hardship did not pause for Christmas. Cold claimed lives regardless of status, though the poor suffered disproportionately. Illness spread more easily in crowded cottages, and limited diets weakened resistance. Christmas sermons often addressed charity, urging the wealthy to remember the poor. Almsgiving increased during the season, though it rarely altered long-term conditions. A loaf of bread or a handful of coins might ease a single night, but not a winter. Children experienced Christmas differently depending on class. Poor children learned early that Christmas did not mean indulgence. It meant warmth if available, rest if permitted, and food if shared. Rich children were introduced to ceremony, taught how to behave at table, how to receive blessings, and how to participate in ritual. Their Christmas education prepared them for roles they would later assume. Time itself felt different during Christmas. Work rhythms slowed, legal matters paused, and travel increased among those who could afford it. Roads became busier near major estates and religious centers, while villages grew quieter. For peasants, this pause offered brief relief. For nobles, it created a stage on which authority could be displayed. Christmas also carried legal and administrative significance. Rents were sometimes due, contracts renewed, and obligations reaffirmed. For the poor, this could mean anxiety alongside celebration. For the rich, it was a moment of consolidation. The same feast that displayed generosity also reminded guests who held power. As the days after Christmas passed, life gradually returned to its usual pace. Decorations were removed, guests departed, and supplies dwindled. For the poor, Christmas ended quietly, leaving behind no excess. For the rich, it left memories of abundance and reinforced alliances. Yet for both, Christmas served its purpose not as escape, but as structure within hardship. Over time, these medieval practices shaped later traditions. The emphasis on shared meals, seasonal greenery, charitable giving, and time set aside from ordinary labor persisted, though transformed. What began as quiet survival rituals and displays of hierarchy eventually softened into more inclusive customs. Yet at their core, medieval Christmas celebrations reveal a world where joy was measured. Expectations were modest, and tradition mattered more than excitement. When you imagine Christmas in medieval England, you are not looking at a single experience, but two parallel ones. One unfolded in great halls filled with light and noise. The other took place in small rooms where warmth was carefully preserved. Both were real, both meaningful, and both shaped by the same winter sky pressing down upon them. And as the final candles burned low and January approached, everyone, poor and rich, alike returned the enduring task of getting through the rest of winter, carrying with them the quiet memory that Christmas, however unequal, had once again passed. Thank you for spending this quiet time with me here on Quiet Boring Sleep. If this gentle walk through medieval Christmas helped your thoughts slow down, or if it kept you company as you drifted toward rest, then I'm truly glad you were here. If you'd like more calm stories about ordinary people, forgotten routines, and the quiet details of history, you can support this space by gently liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It helps this small, peaceful corner continue to exist for nights when you need something slow, steady, and uncomplicated. For now, take a deep breath. Let the story fade into the background and rest well. I'll be here whenever you're ready to listen again.